3. The White Hell. 10 kilometers. On a normal day, on a paved road, it would be a 2-hour walk at a comfortable pace. But this wasn't a normal day, and this wasn't a paved road. This was the Siberian wilderness in January, where the temperature hovered around negative 35 degrees, where the snow was waist deep in places, and where every step was a battle. Vlad and Yuri set out into a landscape of savage beauty. The rising sun painted the snow in shades of gold and pink, and the endless expanse of white stretched out in all directions, broken only by clusters of dark trees and the occasional ridge of exposed rock. It was breathtaking. It was also utterly indifferent to whether they lived or died. They walked in single file, with Vlad breaking trail and Yuri following in his footsteps to conserve energy. The snow crunched beneath their boots, and their breath came in labored gasps that immediately froze into crystals on their scarves. Every movement required conscious effort. The cold sapped strength and made muscles sluggish and unresponsive. After an hour of walking, Vlad estimated they'd covered maybe 2 kilometers. At this rate, it would take them 5 or 6 hours to reach the settlement, assuming they could maintain their pace. Already, his legs were burning with exhaustion, and he could hear Yuri's breathing becoming more labored behind him. They crested a small rise and began crossing a clearing, heading toward a hilltop that would give them a better view of their destination. As they walked, the wind began to pick up, funneling through the mountains with the high-pitched keen that sounded almost like a human voice. Vlad felt something then, a sensation he couldn't quite name. It was more than just cold, more than just fear. It was a primal dread that seemed to emanate from the landscape itself, a sense that they were being watched by something old and hungry. He shook his head, trying to dispel the feeling. Just his imagination, amplified by exhaustion and cold. They reached the top of the hill, and that's when Yuri grabbed his arm. "Vlad," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Look." In the snow ahead of them, clearly visible in the morning light, were tracks. Large tracks. Bear tracks. But not just any bear tracks. Vlad had grown up in Siberia. He knew how to read signs in the snow. These tracks were wrong. The stride was too long, the impressions too deep and erratic, and the tracks circled back on themselves, as if the animal had been pacing, searching, hunting. "Shatun," Yuri breathed, his face going pale beneath his scarf. Every child in northern Russia knew about shatun bears. They were brown bears that had failed to accumulate enough fat before winter, and therefore couldn't enter proper hibernation. Instead, they woke from their dens starving and half-mad with hunger, deprived of their usual caution and docility. Shatun bears were incredibly dangerous, aggressive, unpredictable, and desperate enough to stalk human prey. They were death on 4 legs. And they feared nothing because they were already dying. A sound behind them. Branches snapping, something large moving through the trees. "Run." Vlad shouted. They ran. Their legs pumped desperately through the deep snow, hearts hammering in their chests. Behind them, they could hear something crashing through the underbrush. Heavy, fast, getting closer. Adrenaline flooded their systems, giving them a burst of speed they didn't know they possessed. After several minutes of desperate flight, Vlad's lungs were screaming for air. He slowed to a gasping walk, and Yuri did the same. Both of them bent over with their hands on their knees, sucking in great lungfuls of frozen air that burned going down. Did we lose it? Yuri managed between gasps. Vlad listened intently. The forest around them was silent except for the wind, no sounds of pursuit. Maybe whatever had been behind them hadn't been the bear at all. Maybe it had just been a fallen tree, their exhausted minds creating monsters from shadows. Or maybe the bear was still there, watching, waiting, stalking them like the predator it was born to be. Yuri looked around and spotted something half buried in the snow, a broken branch about 6 feet long and thick as a man's wrist. He pulled it free and began using his small pocket knife to sharpen one end into a crude spear point. "What do you think you'll do with that?" Vlad asked, though he already knew the answer and respected it. "Whatever I have to," Yuri replied, his jaw set with determination that reminded Vlad painfully of their father. They continued walking, more cautiously now, constantly scanning the tree line for movement. The settlement smoke was clearly visible now, maybe 5 or 6 kilometers away. So close, yet still so impossibly far. Another hour passed. They heard wolves again, howling in the distance, calling to each other across the vast wilderness. The sound made their skin crawl, but at least wolves could be seen coming. At least they weren't silent stalkers like bears. Then Yuri stopped abruptly. "What is it?" Vlad asked. Yuri pointed ahead. In the small clearing partially covered by fresh snow was the carcass of a deer. Even from a distance, they could see the blood staining the white snow red. The body was still intact, mostly. Whatever had killed it hadn't finished feeding. "That can't be more than a couple hours old," Vlad said quietly. They heard movement in the forest to their left, then to their right. The hair on the back of Vlad's neck stood up. "We're being watched," Yuri whispered. "Move slowly toward that big pine tree," Vlad said, gesturing to a massive evergreen about 20 meters away. "Don't run. Don't make sudden movements." They began to edge sideways, keeping their eyes on the surrounding forest. Vlad's hand moved to the flare gun in his pocket, though he wasn't sure what good it would do. The bear appeared without warning. It emerged from behind a cluster of young birch trees, and for a moment, Vlad's mind refused to process what he was seeing. This wasn't just a bear. This was a nightmare given flesh. It had to weigh at least 400 kilograms, with massive shoulders hunched forward and a head that seemed too large for its body. But it was the bear's condition that was most horrifying. Its fur was patchy and matted with frozen blood. Its ribs were visible beneath its coat. This was no healthy animal. This was a dying thing, driven mad by starvation and pain, and it had found prey. "Climb!" Vlad screamed. "Climb the tree!" They ran the final meters to the pine tree, Vlad practically throwing Yuri at the lower branches. Vlad scrambled up behind him, his hands scrabbling for purchase among the rough bark. Below them, the bear was coming fast, moving with shocking speed for something so large. Yuri climbed higher, still clutching his makeshift spear. Vlad was right behind him, hauling himself up branch by branch, his muscles screaming with effort. The bear reached the base of the tree and reared up on its hind legs with a roar that shook snow from the branches. "Higher!" Vlad shouted, though they both were already climbing as fast as they could. The bear began to climb after them. Bears were excellent climbers, something many people didn't realize until it was too late. Its massive claws dug into the bark, and it hauled itself upward with terrifying determination. Yuri was about halfway up the tree now, maybe 4 meters off the ground. He stopped climbing and turned, gripping his sharpened stick with both hands, his face set with a mixture of terror and resolve. "Yuri, what are you doing?" Vlad yelled. "Keep climbing." But Yuri had made his choice. He'd found his ground, and he was going to hold it. The bear climbed closer, its massive head level with Yuri's feet. It opened its mouth, revealing yellow teeth and a pink tongue, and lunged upward, jaws snapping. Yuri struck. He drove the sharpened stick down with all his strength, aiming for the bear's open mouth. The point struck home, penetrating the soft tissue of the bear's palate. The animal recoiled with a bellow of pain and fury, nearly losing its grip on the tree. But Yuri wasn't finished. As the bear shook its head, trying to dislodge the stick, Yuri pulled it back and struck again, this time aiming for the nose. The point scored a deep gash across the bear's snout, drawing fresh blood. The bear roared and swiped at Yuri with one massive paw, but Yuri was already repositioning. He struck a third time, putting every ounce of strength and fear and desperation into the blow. The sharpened stick drove into the bear's right eye. The animal's scream was unlike anything Vlad had ever heard. A sound of pure agony that seemed to echo across the entire forest. The bear lost its grip on the tree and fell backward, hitting the ground with the heavy thump that shook the snow from nearby branches. For several long seconds, the bear thrashed on the ground, pawing at its face, that terrible screaming continuing. Then, gradually, it struggled to its feet, shook its massive head, and retreated into the forest, leaving a trail of blood in the snow. Vlad and Yuri remained frozen in the tree, hardly daring to breathe, waiting to see if it would return. Minutes passed. The forest was silent except for the wind. Finally, Vlad began to climb down. "Come on," he said softly. "We need to move. It'll recover, and when it does, it'll come back." They dropped to the ground, and Vlad immediately pulled his younger brother into a fierce embrace, tears freezing on his cheeks. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," he said, his voice breaking. "Papa would be so proud of you." Yuri was shaking, whether from cold, the fear, or adrenaline, Vlad couldn't tell. Probably all three, but he managed a small smile. I was so scared, I thought I was going to pass out. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared, Vlad said. It means doing what needs to be done, even when you are terrified. They continued their journey, moving faster now, despite their exhaustion. The settlement was clearly visible, maybe 3 kilometers away. They were more than halfway there. They were going to make it.